hear me, you fucking doorknob? Pick up on you, oh chosen one.
But I like my demonic build.
The Shadowlands will strip away your inferior DPS and grant you a new build.
It is not yours to take.
The momentum will heal your shit DPS.
I am my shit DPS.
Your destiny will be to work for your DPS now.
My destiny is having an easy DPS life.
Oh no! But what about the talents, gear rotation, and more?
Hey, you. Yeah, you. You know what time it is, huh? You know what I'm about to say, right? You know that by now, you could have clicked the subscribe and bell thingy 3 times, right? I could have also stopped and started the video. But it was important to let you know that it would be really helpful for us and you to click the stuff. So please, click the stuff. Thank you. Talent. There are currently 2 main builds that work for Havoc, and both work in raids and dungeons alike, so feel free to choose the one you want. On the first row, for the demonic build, which you may already be familiar with, you take Blind Fury. This will make it so I-Beam will generate a full bar of Fury if you channel the whole thing. It alters your rotation a bit and adds a really nice consistency to the build. Although having a buttload of Fury is good in a vacuum, the fact that you will always start your demonic window with full Fury is important for your damage output. Be aware when you see your I-Beam coming off cooldown and make sure you press it when you are at around 30 Fury to waste as little as possible of the resource. For the other build, which will be the momentum build, take Fell Blade. This will add a little charge on an ability that also generates a decent amount of Fury. Its cooldown will also be reset by Demon's Bite or by the next talent option. And surprising no one, that option is Demon Blade. This has kind of always been the synergy you wanted with Fell Blade to some people's dislike. Demon Blades removes your Demon's Bite from your spellbook and makes it so your auto attacks generate Fury and deal extra damage, all with a 60% chance to proc. This makes it easier to fit in important globals during a burst damage window, globals such as I-Beam, Chaos Strike, and Blade Dance. Having to manually spam Demon's Bite is time-consuming for a fast-paced spec like momentum. The alternative is Insatiable Hunger, which makes your Demon's Bite deal 20% more damage and generate 5 to 10 more Fury. Nothing major here, the row addresses Fury generation in different ways, and this one works better with the demonic build. Next up, for both builds, Unbound Chaos will be the best choice here. It's not a particularly easy talent to play, but since you will be dashing with momentum, the only thing you will change is to make sure you will be dashing through the mobs. An extra added bonus is that this damage that it deals is uncapped in AoE, meaning that in high Mythic Plus keys, if your tank can handle large pulls, this baby will seriously chunk. If you play the demonic build and want to have a slightly easier time and not have to worry about dashing, weirdly, I'm so dashing, Glaive Tempest is your alternative. On a 20-second cooldown, this does a lot of burst AoE damage, and with the frequency of usage can be a really good choice, especially in dungeons. Burst damage is always preferred, no matter what, and with this one you have a tad more control over your damage and you don't have to worry about platforms or pulling other packs or things that I do on stream. Moving on, the 4th row has defensive options. In tough encounters where you know you could take lethal damage or close to it, Netherwalk is your friend. It makes you immune to damage and increase your movement speed by a lot. This is great at soaking mechanics, traversing puddles of bad, and overall give your healers time to get you up if there is ever a scenario where you need to stay in this form for its full duration. Alternatively, if you feel relatively safe, Soul Rending will be the counter option. Passive Leech will keep you healthy for relatively longer periods of time, and you don't have to worry about a 3-minute defensive that will prevent you from attacking. Moving down, you have another build defining talent row. For the demonic build, Cycle of Hatred is going to be your jam. More I-beams means more demonic and more fury means more chaos strike, which means more I-beams once again. Not much to think about here except for the fact that you will likely never press Blade Dance unless in very big AoE scenarios. As for the momentum build, Essence Break is finally an option and the best one on the row as well. With its current iteration, Essence Break will damage and debuff the targets in front of you to receive more damage from Chaos Strikes and Blade Dances by 40% for 8 seconds. This is incredible burst, which obviously has to be paired with momentum for even more damage. Listen, this ain't no walk in the park. Managing all of these procs and buffs and debuffs will take some time and practice, but god damn if this isn't the most fun Havoc has been since Legion, and I don't know what is. Also, to fully optimize the momentum buffs, it kinda differs a little bit on the legendary usage, so more on that later. The second to last row is all about crowd control, and here it's mostly about your preference and what your group needs. In raids, you might want to take Master of the Glaive simply for the occasional glaive throw when you are out of reach of your target, just to maximize your damage output. The Snare can be useful in Mythic Plus, but hardly ever, and there are a lot of classes that can do it better than you. Alternatively, it falls down to what type of stun you need. Fell Eruption is a good single target stun that does a little damage as well, and has a short cooldown, while Unleashed Power makes your already existing AoE stun cost no fury and have a 33% reduced cooldown. Considering it's one of the best AoE stuns in the game and can shatter souls from target, this talent works well for Mythic Plus packs. And lastly, the quintessential build-defining row, Demonic, clearly for the build carrying its name. It will make you enter meta for 6 seconds at the end of each I-beam cast, giving you a damage boost and 25% haste. This will give you burst windows every 30 seconds minus however many seconds off of I-beam you can shave off by playing the Cycle of Hatred talent. This build is easy to play, pretty straightforward, and does a lot of high consistent damage. Alternatively, you have Momentum. After using Fell Rush, you have 15% extra damage for 6 seconds. Additionally, Vengeful Retreat will have 5 seconds shaved off its cooldown and generate Fury if you damage an enemy with it, building nicely into Momentum with multiple on-demand Fury gains. Between Demon Blades, which are RNG admittedly, Immolate Aura, Fell Blade, and Vengeful Retreat, you will gain some really good Fury generation, and the better you are at managing it on top of keeping up the momentum buff as much as possible, the better your damage will be. This build is difficult. It's prone to a lot of mistakes, rotation or positioning, or both. It's a high risk, high reward playstyle, and honestly, the reward is worth the time investment if you decide to learn and practice it. The other way around. When it comes to gear and stats and things alike, the best way to do it is to sim yourself. You can do it today with platforms like raidboss.com, which has a lot of tools to answer all your questions regarding gear. Alternatively, we can help you out with a stat priority that works for all gear except rings and trinkets, since they don't have agility, which is your main stat. Agility stands at the base of your damage and fuels everything you have. Outside trinkets and rings, this means you will want to equip the highest eye level you have, since that's where the most agility will be at. After agility, go with crit and versatility for general use, especially in Mythic Plus. Once you raid, you will want crit even more than anything else, since the best shard setup, which we will discuss, will want crit like a thirsty camel. Versatility is a good flat damage increase source for everything you do, plus adds a bit of defensiveness. Ace this next with mastery at the bottom. This is just a rough suggestion of the stats. Remember, simming will give you an actual correct answer. Speaking of which, you can continue simming even in the consumable windows if you want the exact correct answer, but of course we will provide you with some suggestions. Your weapons will have a few options for the enchant. One of them can have the Celestial Guidance in all of the content, while the other can have Sinful Revelation in raids for single target performance, or Lightless Force in AoE for, well, AoE damage output. Put an Eternal Skirmish on your chest with a Heavy Desolate Armor kit if you will be pushing tough content. Fortified Avoidance will be your cloak enchant for that damage reduction and stamina, and Eternal Agility on your boots as your main stat enchant. Gems and Rings is the title of the next section, which I don't have to say out loud because fuck it. In keeping with the stat priority, go with Tenet of Critical Strike enchants for your rings and Deadly Jewel Cluster gems for your sockets to fill in with that much needed crit. Use the Spectral Flask of Power as your main flask of choice and the Shaded Sharpening Stones for your weapons. The best DPS potion in all encounters will be the Potion of Spectral Agility, coupled with the Shaded Sharpening Stones mentioned before for your weapons. Taking Phantom Fire and Empowered Exorcism with Shadow Core Oil instead is an alternative for single target and AoE respectively, but they hardly seem to pull ahead on geared characters where they seem to seem similar, so might as well go with something that works best in all scenarios as opposed to specific combat types. And since agility is king, you want to eat feasts, ideally, especially in raids, but feasts can be expensive, so the crit food alternative is the best replacement since crit is still juicy and nutritional. In terms of covenants, there's two ways to approach it. One is the simple way, the "oh, this looks cool and feels cool" way. In that way, just pick what's cool, guys. Get your Mog, your Mount, or Covenant Hall and have fun. There's also the try hard way, the MDI and World First Racing Choose It way. And yeah, in that case, you will gain a few percentages of extra damage, and yeah, that will mean you will be choosing Night Fae. That will also mean that if you don't play the spec perfectly and are in the top few percentage of the world's best Havocs, then it won't really matter. Listen, I try hard, I picked Night Fae, and I am so not in the top percentages of Havocs. I also know that if I swapped Necrolords, the overall performance that I do will go unnoticed by my friends, so as long as I practice and being better at Havoc and not better at Night Fae Havoc, I will be a better player overall. With that out of the way, Night Fae is the best and you should pick it, because it's blue, but also because it has the most single target and AoE potential with the Hunt, but also the Soulbinds. For raiding and actually pure single target fights, Nia will still provide the best single target option build by going towards Nia's Tool's burst and following whichever path you think will work best for you. This will optimize your single target damage as best it can. Use her on fights like Taragru, Eye, the Nine, and Guardian. Although the Hunt is AoE capped, going with Korain for Mythic Plus will give you crazy AoE burst damage with the still powerful First Strike. By building the Soulbind this way, you will gain a lot of crit chance when engaging a new pack, and since Havoc has bursty damage at regular intervals, the value you gain by exploiting this outweighs the lack of targets the Hunt will pick. By building the Soulbind this way, you will gain a lot of crit chance when engaging a new pack, and since Havoc has bursty damage at regular intervals, the value you gain by exploiting this outweighs the lack of targets Hunt will hit. Not to mention that Korain will be better than Nia in raids also on the other 6 boss fights, especially with the Shards of Domination set we will be looking at in a second. There are ways to play Dreamweaver as well with more potency conduits, but we'll leave that for another time. And sure, you can choose the paths we recommend, but you still need proper conduits to slot in or farm for. Since both these builds have 2 potency conduits at any given time, the 2 best options are Growing Inferno, which is your ideal choice in all content, whether it's raids or dungeons, and Relentless Onslaught seems to perform the best in raids right now for optimal single target damage, while in dungeons it can be replaced with Unnatural Malice to buff the Hunt's dot damage. Your endurance options will still see Viscous Ink, Fell Defender, and the new generically bland and boring Condensed Anima Sphere, while the finesse slots can be filled with Fellfire Haste and Ravenous Consumption, which works especially great in dungeons, where you will find scenarios where mobs have more than one buff on them for you to dispel. Trinkets didn't change much from last patch if you watched our previous guide. Pile of Putrefaction is still your bis, and while you're farming it, you might also get the infinitely divisible Ooze. Shadow Grasp Totem still works amazing as well, and the raid actually gives Salvage Fusion Amplifier, basically another trinket that procs from auto attacks. As you can see, there is a pattern here. Alternatively, trinkets with main stat procs or trinkets that can be paired with major cooldowns will work for you, but really you can check bloodmallet.com or herodamage.com for lists of trinkets ranked by how good they are for you. And who can forget the 9.1 tier sets? Shards of Domination, or more aptly known as... But alas, the power gain from the tier set is undeniable, and although the shards themselves give you a bonus when you match 3 of the same color, with the bonus only being active in the Raid, Maw, and Torghast, the individual bonuses from the shards are good in all scenarios. The best set bonus to go for is the Winds of Winter, which is formed when you get 3 Frost shards. The Shard of Core, which is the best one for its individual power, together with the Shard of Beck from the Blood set and the Shard of Diz from the Unholy, will be the 3 individual shards that are the first things you want to slot in if you will be playing M+. While the Raid will still want you to prioritize putting 3 Frost shards first for the set bonus. Similar to last year, the 3 main legendaries return as viable options with an additional one for Mythic+. For raiding and optimizing single target damage, Burning Wound is ideal and can and should be crafted on your cloak to avoid overlap with Domination gear. This will make Demon's Bite apply a strong dot to the target. In theory, this can be taken in dungeons as well, provided you will use weak auras or nemplates settings to track and spread the dot on as many targets as possible, or switch up a few talents when playing with Demonic, aka the talent setup on the screen, to actually make it easier to spread the dot with just your auto attacks. For M+, though, you can go with Collective Anguish, which makes your I-Beam spawn a Vengeance Demon Hunter to cast Fell Devastation on your targets. This does tremendous AoE burst damage, and if timed with momentum and other buffs, it will pump. Although momentum will be prioritized with Essence Break windows, by the way. Both of these legendaries can be used by either of the 2 builds. Although Dark Lair Boon, a good AoE alternative and a fun one as well, really only works well with the Demonic build thanks to the increase in I-Beam casts overall by the build and the synergy I-Beam has overall with the build that intrinsically increases its value. The new Nightfake Covenant legendary is also seeing play at the high levels of Mythic+. Blazing Slaughter will pop an Immolate on you once you finish charging and grant you a stacking 4% agility buff per target hit up to the 5 targets, limited by the base ability. This one also works with both builds, by the way, and obviously offers a different damage profile where you will literally explode on the meters every 1.5 minutes. Although the first major criteria you need for a weapon to be an upgrade for you is eye level, with eye level being worth more than any stack combination, there are still 2 weapons which stand out a bit more than the rest. Poxstorm, Longsword of Pestilence, is still a very good one, particularly because it has a proc which we've established is great for your spec as a whole, but also haste. And with the Raid, now Painsmith drops another BIS for you, which is Cruciform Vein Ripper, a mandatory one to farm if raiding is your main thing, maybe even BIS for PvP. This one applies bleeds on the target which end up doing significant damage over the course of a long fight. You want to start by popping Arcane Torrent if you're a Blood Elf, or just pre-pot, pre-combat. Then go Fellblade into Fell Rush. Use I-Beam, pop the Hunt, Vengeful Retreat into Metamorphosis straight during the animation. Essence Break next, then Fell Rush again. Start popping Chaos Strikes to dump all your fury, then use Immolation Aura and move into the normal priority list. The purpose of this opener is to exploit momentum to the best of your ability first and foremost. Second, the best way to use the Hunt is with as much haste as possible, hence why you ideally want to always use it after an I-Beam, since the haste will make the dot stronger. Third, by using Vengeful Retreat with meta, you optimize your fury gain to set yourself up for Essence Break coupled with momentum when you start dumping your fury. Lastly, Immolation Aura can be cast as you walk towards the boss, so you get the tick on it as soon as possible. Top Havocs have different openers where they either go quick into Immolation or delay it a bit to make all the ticks hit the boss. This opener is a doozy and pretty hard to get right. Again, practice makes perfect. When using Demonic, start with a Fell Rush to engage the boss into Immolation Aura for the reasons mentioned before. Use I-Beam to trigger your Demonic. Pop Meta to extend it and reset I-Beam, which you instantly cast again, and continue with the normal priority. The priority is basically the most important spell to cast at any time given a set of circumstances. For the momentum build, start with Meta as the first and most important skill to use, making sure to also benefit from its cooldown reset of I-Beam. Fell Rush next if Unbound Chaos is up, Vengeful Retreat to generate Fury, Fell Rush if you can hit more than a target or to apply momentum, Immolation Aura next, use Fellblade if you are below 80 Fury, cast Essence Break on cooldown, same with I-Beam, use Chaos Strike when above 50 Fury, use Fell Rush next, and throw Glaives as a filler. The single target priority for Demonic is as follows. Metamorphosis is always the most important spell to put on cooldown as long as you make sure I-Beam is also on cooldown to ensure its cooldown reset will not go to waste. Fell Rush next if the Unbound Chaos buff is active. Otherwise, Immolation Aura is next on the list. I-Beam after that. Use Chaos Strike if you are above 50 Fury, Demon's Bite as a filler and to generate Fury. Regardless of what build you use, the AoE rotation has only one major change, and that is the inclusion of Blade Dance on 3 or more targets. Other stuff that is obvious remains, well, obvious. If you can hold your AoE abilities such as I-Beam or Essence Break for a few seconds to ideally hit more oncoming targets with them, then hold them. You usually never want to keep things off cooldown for very long or really at all for that matter. But in M+, the damage priority is a bit more relative since it's more important to burst down as many targets as possible than to have the most overall damage. The longer a pack survives because you use your major AoE burst on half of its mobs, the worse it is for your tank and healer and your group as a byproduct. It's not very straightforward here, and this starts to be applicable later in higher keys, but being aware of your AoE burst potential will make you an asset to your group. Shout out to the Fellhammer Discord for having some of the smartest Havoc Demon Hunters out there. Havoc Demon Hunters such as Slice, Shadarek, and WordUp who helped feedback our guide and make sure that we don't say something stupid. If you want to learn the spec a little bit more than what we can put in a basic guide, go check them out, because you'll also find information like how to properly open in all the situations, because there's almost as many openers as there are top Havoc Demon Hunters. Almost, not really, but thank you guys. Thank you for feedbacking our guide, and all of the links to their Twitches and Twitters and YouTubes and whatever they have, you'll find down in the description. Thank you, dear Patreons, for supporting the channel time and time again. We are really, really grateful for your assistance and everything that you do. Things are on the rise for the channel, and we have some really, really exciting new things that we have planned on top of, you know, the guides, the news, the TLFs, the podcast, and all of that, so stay tuned. And if you, dear viewer, want to support us a little bit more and find out what this is all about, check the link down below. Thank you for watching the video. Let's see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.